This episode of Film Riot is brought to you by Domain.com. Welcome to Film Riot Mondays. This is literally take 8 because Josh hasn't liked any of the takes that came before it.
Because you're boring.
I was going to say, I'm not boring. Do you prefer to be director or cinematographer? Definitely director. That is my number one passion. Just taking an idea, a story, a script, whatever it is, and being that driving force throughout the entire thing to help bring it together. Not being the one that does everything, obviously. You're bringing in unbelievably talented people, and I think the number one role of a director is letting unbelievably talented people be unbelievably talented and just being there to make sure everybody stays on the same path together, so you don't have a ton of people just making their own movie, but just letting people be creative, but making sure everybody stays in a unified vision, which I think is that number one job of a director, to not be a dictator, but a collaborator, which isn't what you were asking, but hey, there you go, director, yes. Although I do love cinematography too. How do you write action scenes? I've actually written it two ways. One, I've left it somewhat blank, fight scene breaks out, or I've written it out completely, beat by beat, swing by swing, exactly what's gonna happen in that action scene. So it just depends on what I want. If it's just a generic running scene, you know, like in Proximity, Todd chases Josh through the woods, I'm not gonna write out, then Todd turns a corner, then another corner. I'm really gonna write out that he chases him, and then, you know, those specific beats that matter to the story for what came after it, for what's coming next. Otherwise, you can sort of just choreograph that on the day, which can be a little bit better because, you know, we don't have a lot of options for locations. So if you're writing something very specific, you might get stuck in your head of what that should look like. Whereas if you leave it to fight scene breaks out, once you get your location, you go and look at it, you can figure out what best you could do with that fight scene in that actual space. So leaving that open enough for you to get creative in that way later on, if it doesn't have to be specific for the story. But it really just depends on the writer and how you want to do it. Do you have a favorite Kubrick film? Yes, The Shining is easily my favorite, which some people might not agree with that, but I love that. I love it. I love that film. Top 3 movies of the year 2014 with a quick summary of why. Number 1 was Whiplash, number 2 was Birdman, number 3 was Gone Girl. Gone Girl is David Fincher, and everything he does is absolutely amazing. I just love the tone of his films, the pacing of his films, the way visually he constructs them and plays them out. I'm not gonna spoil anything, but the way that they handled the story and they unfolded things because I didn't know the story beforehand was just freaking fantastic. The acting was great, and just the way Fincher handles his actors and his scene development, I just think is so brilliant. I love studying his films, especially with the sound off, because of how he uses his camera. Everything's so silent and it's so methodical and just planned out perfectly. It is awesome. Birdman was just if you've seen Birdman, I don't really need to explain why Birdman was so awesome. Like they said, it was very experimental in the type of film that it was. They made it feel like one long shot, which totally did not feel like a gimmick. It felt like the right way to do it because it kind of felt like you were watching a stage play, which is what the film was following, the creation of a stage play, even though the film was really about ego, but everything was top notch on it, acting, the whole nine. It was just it was another one of those movies that you watch and you're like, I will never do anything that good. And Whiplash, I just adored that movie. It was sort of a horror movie of sorts, looking at, you know, do you need to go through anguish for your art, and just that relationship between the student and the teacher. J.K. Simmons just made that freaking movie. I plan to watch it few more times for sure. How do you create a good jump scare? There's 2 types of jump scares. I do like them both, but you have the cheap loud scare where just a loud noise or something happens and it is fun, and then you have the earned scare, which I do think is the better type. I think the best way to build to a jump scare is to know where you want them and not to overuse them. If you're using too many jump scares, especially just loud noise scares where it's basically just pots being slammed together to make someone flinch, it's not a true scare. And when you use them so much, I think the audience gets used to that and it starts not being so effective. Whereas I like to let the water smooth out and then hit it with a big splash, if that makes any sense. So for me, it's about less scares, but more impactful ones. So you build to those scares by involving your audience in the story and in the characters. So you're building that tension, and maybe you're creating moments where the audience thinks something's about to happen, or they think they're about to see something they don't want to see, but then you don't show them that. So you're building this tension inside them to where it builds up and it builds up until you finally can release that with one really good and earned jump scare, which will be much more effective. At least that's how I like to do it. Last question, can you show us the daily life of Ryan Conley? Yeah. That's about it. Domain.com is a place to go if you're trying to get yourself seen upon the interwebs because they're reliable, affordable, and easy to use. They have the reliability, the affordability, and the easy to usability.
Nice word, bro.
Thank you. Plus, you can slap some brand recognition on your situation with all the domain extensions that they got growing 200 plus list action of. You got .ninja, .expert, .nyc, .club, all that you can use to however you want to use them is the point that I'm trying to make. Plus, if you want to save money, you can use the coupon code FilmRiot at checkout to get yourself 20% off your domain names, your web hosting, your email, whatever you want. When you think domain names, think domain.com.
Logo.
So that's it for today, which means it's time for my suggestion of the week. This one is called Fish Friend, which I found because my friend Dan Trachtenberg tweeted it on the internets. And like he said, it's kind of Pixar-ish, but with a very dark twist. So check that out right here. It's really well made, and definitely watch the behind the scenes once you've seen the short film. But that's it for today. Don't forget to write, shoot, edit, repeat.